Hello and welcome to the Music Ally Focus podcast with me, Music Ally's editor Joe Sparrow, and I'm very happy to welcome Peter Sinclair, CEO of beatBread, the platform that provides funding for independent musicians and labels, to the podcast this week. beatBread's been around for about 5 years now and has recently launched something it calls the Deal Comparison Tool, which uses data to, quote, enable artists and labels to compare and fully understand their funding offers, avoid unexpected traps, and make better funding choices. Now, beatBread is offering an alternative approach to the traditional music industry funding model. So in this episode of Music Ally Focus, in collaboration with beatBread, we hear Peter's thoughts on what artists are looking for now when they seek funding, how the standard industry practice around signing deals, finding money, and retaining control is changing. We hear about the ways that beatBread are working with labels and distributors to provide them with finance and what that allows them to do. And we also hear from Peter what he thinks about the roles of major labels are now and what they will become in the future. It's a great conversation about now and tomorrow. Let's go over to Peter right now. All right, I'm very happy to welcome Peter Sinclair, CEO of beatBread, to the Focus Podcast. Hello, Peter. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you here. Now, first of all, let's do this nutshell pitch and tell us what beatBread does, who it's for, and how it's different.
beatBread is a funding platform for independent artists and independent musicians. We are able to provide funding that gives artists and musicians choice of their service providers that are right for them. We give them transparency into deal terms. We give them tons of choice of different deal structures. And those clients of ours can also choose their marketing and services partners. So we're unbundled finance, which allows for more flexibility and more leverage for independent artists and independent labels.
You know, you've been around now for approximately 5 years, which is a short period of time, but in life, but it's a long period of time in running a business and building it up.
Yeah, so we have funded about 1,500 artists and independent labels. So we're really excited about that. We're not quite, we're getting close at $100 million of funding through artists and labels. We stay tuned in the next month for some announcements on some more fundraising and more capital we have to deploy in the market. But we've raised, over $130 million of capital to deploy for artists and independent labels. And we're really excited about the fact that we have launched a deal comparison tool in the last month that allows artists and labels to share an offer and not just see what a lawyer would see, but see how that deal is likely to play out in the future in a low, medium, and high case based on our data predictions. We're fundamentally a data science company, and we are very good at predicting what not only existing music, but even new releases may do in the future. And it's a great planning tool to see, is this offer really going to meet my business need? And in the process, we have multiple partners who will also give other options, not our money, but other people's money to give, artists and labels leverage as they think about the right deal for them.
So this is where catalog holders, artists, labels can come to you and say, okay, here's our data. You look at it. You can make some sort of offer on future earnings, and obviously that frees up them to do things in the present as opposed to future. I'm interested in that, the sort of unbundled part, the sort of where you have partners. Yeah. What advantages does that offer out of interest?
Yeah, so, the thing about the music industry more than any other industry, and probably more than any other form of entertainment or art or media, is every artist is different, not just in their style, how they like to work, and then you have career stage and geography and genre. And, this business was born, I found myself at Universal Music. I'm not a lifelong music guy, but for a whole host of reasons, accidental. And what I observed was there's some fantastic marketing people. There's some fantastic A&Rs, all these things. But it's very, very hard, no matter how good you are, to serve the particular needs of the full range of artists that are on those on those labels. And so what I saw was about half of the artists in the major label system that I was working with, and I was doing digital marketing and VIP stuff and data aggregation, about half of the managers and artists probably could do what we wanted to do for them as well or better.
Yeah.
Not because Universal's marketing teams or all the various labels were bad. They were great, but it's just really hard to serve the particular needs. And there are lots of great marketing and distribution options outside the major label system. So if a artist or label can choose the right service partners for them, divorced from the check, and keep those conversations separate, or at least make the conversations in a series of serial decisions where they have some leverage to leave in the future, they're going to get the best of both worlds rather than the second best of both worlds.
So really, it's about recognizing the sort of the unbundling of everything in the world at the moment, where the role of major labels obviously is still very important, but you're sort of saying that I mean, you're not just looking at major label artists, but you're saying that old system doesn't work for everybody, and you're providing an alternative road through there.
Yeah, it doesn't work for everyone, and I think the other thing, just to a lot of people, look at what we do and they immediately assume that we're for tiny artists or marginal artists or marginal labels, and we do serve that community, right? Because we have invested so much in data and process automation, we can with confidence and efficiently do a $1,000 deal, but we can also do a $10 million deal. And so we're seeing, particularly in the last 18 months, a lot of artists who would otherwise go to a major label looking for funding from us. And these are people with many millions or even over 10 million monthly listeners. And they have their own unique needs. And increasingly, I don't think the major labels are going away, but their value proposition is serving a narrow and narrow kind of musician. Or you couldn't do Wicked, right? That takes some sort of major entertainment muscle to pull all that together. And so there's a certain kind of superstar. Not every superstar, like Kendrick Lamar probably doesn't belong in a major. I know he uses them for distribution, but that's about it, right? They don't really market him and manage his brand. So I think that it's a diverse ecosystem that has developed, and it's going to become more diverse and more robust. And the majors have a role to play, but I just think it's going to be narrower going forward.
Yeah. So with that in mind, then you're talking about you're serving the needs of artists all the way up the pyramid. So if you could put it in a nutshell, what do artists want from your service?
Yeah. Well, artists want a lot of things. Fundamentally, they're looking for funding. They're looking for insight into the deal that they have, or the deal they could get from us. How's it going to play out? And they want choice. So, we can do deals as short as a year. We can do deals as long as 20 years. We can include new releases, 1 or 2 new albums or an EP. We cannot include new releases, and therefore the artist keeps ownership of that and just leverages their catalog and sort of is betting on themselves. We can flow through income. We can not flow income. We can fiddle with royalty rates. And all of these things are done because we've invested so much in the platform and data very quickly. So we can just provide tons and tons of choice and tons of insight into how those things play out over time. And then because we can do that, we can then marry that financial deal to a number of distribution partners. We work with those owned by the majors. We work with those that are independent. And then they can find the right service partner on the distribution, or they may hire an independent marketing company as well. Okay. So
one of the interesting things you said earlier was that you're essentially sort of, well, I can't remember your exact phrase, but you're a data company, right? And your business is looking at data, predicting the future, which to me sounds like a very difficult thing to do, or at least something you need to be very confident about. And then it can be leveraged in terms of offering finance and other services as well around that. Okay. But you've just mentioned there are a whole bunch of options. And with my cynic's hat on, I would say that historically the music industry has perhaps taken advantage of all that the sense that big players have said, look, it's really complicated. Let us take care of this for you, and you sign this, and we'll make those decisions for you, right? Which I understand how that worked in the past. But now, we all adjust the settings on everything that we have access to. So what's the approach in terms of helping those artists, labels, rights holders, whatever, navigate that very big shopping list of options?
Yeah. So Yeah. So uh, the way that we do this is, and to be frank, it depends upon the size of the artist or the label.
Yeah.
For an artist or a label that may qualify for no more than say $50,000 of funding, it's largely a self-serve platform, and they can see the consequences in terms of royalty rate and term length, depending on how much money they want. They literally can play with it themselves. They can certainly call up and talk to someone for a little while, um, but we have our own limits in sort of how much consultation we can do on a deal that's say $50,000. But we do try and give people choice and very clearly show, you know, if you choose this deal and you perform in the middle of our prediction, you will be unrecouped for this long, right?
Right. Right.
If your music does in the bottom quarter, it'll take that long. If it does, and we go out of our way to sort of disclose that. If you're a larger label, a large artist, let's say we're talking about $500,000 or a $5 million deal, we will spend time with you. We will show you lots of options. We will really spend time understanding your needs. And then presumably someone with that kind of deal has offers outside of us, right? And
Yeah.
so rather than fight that, we welcome that. And we encourage people to share their offers. And we run them through a set of digital tools that actually looks at the predictions of how this would play out in real life, right? And we have partners who will also make other offers, right? And so usually when someone's using a deal comparison tool, much less off, it's less than 50% of the time we end up funding the deal, right? Which is fine, right? Our goal is to help people make a good decision. If we happen to have the best capital, that's great. We have partners who often will be more aggressive than we will. But by the way, if the first offer they have is the best offer, we'll tell people that. And so we sort of walk people through, what those scenarios are. I have to say, since we started doing this, we announced the deal comparison tool a little more than a month ago, but we've been sort of quietly using it now for almost 6 months. Lawyers in this industry, working in good faith on behalf of their clients, often are very fixated on a couple of headline terms. And there are labels and distributors, some owned by the majors, some not owned by the majors, that have learned how to hit the buttons of a lawyer and set particularly independent labels up for a situation where it looks like they're getting a great deal and they're winning the negotiation. But given the scope of the rights, the nature of the recoupment rate, all those things, they are almost certain about half the time to end up in financial distress a couple of years later, and
Right.
then the independent distributor swoops in and buys the rights to save them, right?
Okay.
And so we've seen this again and again, and it's actually, I'm in this to make money, but that's not all, the only reason I'm in this for. Like, this is a mission-driven company. I'm not the kind of person who can get out of bed every morning just to make a buck. And we really want to empower the creative sector, and we really think that providing this transparency can help people.
Yeah, of course, under the terms of the deals that you're looking at, the artist or rights holder retains the rights, right? So you are not in that kind of that mix anyway.
Well, so they retain the rights, but I guess a couple things. One is, even deals where there is no sale, an independent label can get an offer for a lot of money. It'll have certain exclusivity on their new music. It will take a claim on their new releases and new signings. And they'll be in a situation where their catalog will have to massively outperform any reasonable expectation. And their new releases will have to do well. Otherwise, they're going to be massively unrecouped, even though they're not selling.
Yeah.
And be in a bad spot. And there's very often very tiny tweaks to terms that can make a very terrible deal into a workable deal. But in our experience, even the most sophisticated lawyers don't really think that way, right? They just think about winning the negotiation as opposed to how is this going to work depending upon how the music performs.
Right.
And we think that's a real value. I would say that, just full disclosure, we and our partners sometimes do buy as well. It is a
Okay.
minority of our business. I don't love doing that, to be totally honest with you. We always show what a 5, 8, or 10-year license looks like for someone who wants to buy. And I always tell my team, make sure they really want to sell. If you're 45, 50 years old, your music is 10, 20 years old, you don't want to burden your kids with that, and you can get, $500,000 or $1 million to sell it. That's sometimes a really good decision.
Right.
There are people out there, however, buying rights. Some very well-funded VC-backed business out there buying rights from artists in their 20s, where the music is only, a year or two old.
Yeah.
Sometimes at prices for less than we would give a 5-year advance on.
Right.
And
Okay.
it's really gross. So, yeah.
Okay, good to know. That's good context. Well, let's talk about the deal comparison tool. So what you're saying, so from a user perspective, someone with a catalog or with some rights, they can, what sort of information do they need to enter, and what data do you show them?
Yeah, sure.
As a starting point.
Yeah, so you can come to our site, or you can, if you have enough monthly listeners, you can reach out to someone on our team. And your name, contact information. We like to see your Spotify ID, just so we can pull a bunch of data programmatically. We look at more than just Spotify, but Spotify has made it. It's a great sort of almost like an ISRC, right? Where it's a nice way to. A lot of other data sources reference Spotify. So from there, we can then pull. We have relationships with a number of global charting services, a number of social aggregators, so we can see Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, not just activity, but fan activity, comments. We actually scrape the web for press mentions, a bunch of other things. And all of that generates a base range of outcomes for and advance amounts for different structures. But that is just an estimate. We need 3 to 6 months of distribution, or if someone wants to finance publishing, we'll do that too. Publishing reports, and that's where we can munge the data even more in a more detailed way, and look at much more detail about geographic information split by platform, YouTube versus Spotify versus Amazon, song splits, all those other things. So
and then what do you show them in terms of like this versus this versus this?
Yeah. So what we show them is a dashboard with, on the left are variables that the artist or label can control in the deal. On the right are the financial consequences of those. And so we always say we don't negotiate, but we're very flexible, meaning it's all right there for you to choose. So some people want to, you said I get $100,000 for 5 new songs plus half my catalog on a 3-year deal. Can you just do that, but add 10%? And the answer is always no. We will show you our best and final offer right out of the gate. And so, the artist can move the term length. Longer term means more money. They can move the recoupment rate, right? So they can have a lower recoupment rate, meaning, 70 or 60%, which would mean more money, versus a 90% recoupment rate. They can include new music or not. 5 new songs, 10 new songs, 20 new songs. They can choose flow-through income. How much do they want to keep each month to pay the rent, et cetera? And then the final thing they can do is they can actually tell us which distributor they're interested in switching to, if they're willing to switch. And once they do that, there's a whole nother section of the site which then displays all the different service offerings that those distributors offer. And some of those distributors are willing to sweeten the deal beyond what we would provide. Yeah.
Okay. So do these people trend towards taking one type of deal, or is it really a case of horses for courses here?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. I can tell you, the most common deal on our site is a 3-year deal. 5-year deals are the second most common. Then we have ones and twos, and then occasionally someone will take a 20-year deal, which is a more friendly version of selling your catalog, meaning that 20 years it reverts to you. And then, so that's the sort of term length. They can also choose to include new music or not. So they get extra money if they want to include their next 5 songs, their next 10 songs, or the next 20 songs. Some artists, if they add 5 or 10 new songs, their advance may double. Others, it may only go by 2 or 3%, and people don't like to see that, but it's all data driven. And so if you don't like your new release advance, don't take it. Right? Say, beatBread, you're not fair to me. You're wrong, and that's great. Like, I hope we all.
So this is kind of. I'm not asking you to give away your secret sauce, right? But this is quite nuanced in a sense, isn't it? That you're sort of saying, okay, we're predicting that your next 5 songs are going to really take off, so we're going to give you this extra chunk of money. Or versus we're sort of predicting it's going to maybe tick along in the same way as it is now, and we're adjusting that accordingly. So, what is how do people feel about including future songs?
We're really good at predicting. So we've done almost 1,500 deals. Our deals are, I said 3s are the most common, 5 is the next most common, but the average length of our deal is about 5 years, right? Because we can get 20s and got a lot of 5s here. The 5s tend to be bigger deals, so that sort of pulls the average up. In the life of our company, our predicted cash flows to our actual cash flows are actually within 2%.
Wow. Okay.
Now, what that doesn't mean is that we're right every time. So some people say, "Oh, you predict this, your prediction's wrong." Well, we actually, for every deal, we make a probabilistic prediction. So we say, in the median case, you're going to be here. In the bottom 10% of scenarios, you're going to be here. In the top 10% of scenarios, you're here. We can't fund new music in the top 10% of scenarios every time because we'll lose money, right? Yeah. That doesn't mean that won't happen, right? And so, we are effectively showing people the median case. And if they happen to outperform, the good thing about our deals is they're retaining ownership, and they'll just recoup faster, right? And if they underperform, the good news is it's not a loan. We're not going to charge interest or penalties or things like that. So, but those probabilities are what we then use when we look at the deal comparison tool for sort of larger artists and labels when they have all these offers. Then it's really helpful to think about, well, what happens if it turns out that my next 3 new signings, I'm an independent label, perform slightly below average? Am I still going to have a robust business, or am I going to be in financial distress? Right? What happens if my new music completely takes off? How much is this offer I have going to take of that upside versus some other offer that maybe has 95% of the money but isn't taking quite such a pound of flesh for 5 years later? Yeah. And we find that that's a very useful exercise, even though we don't always provide the money. In fact, we usually don't provide the money when someone uses the deal comparison tool. I've never had someone not go through this exercise and say, "Oh, wow, I didn't understand that," right. and think a little bit differently about the deal they had in front of them.
One thing I'm always interested about is what people do with the money, not in a nosy way, but in a sort of structural and a strategic way. Because it's I can sort of understand that from the perspective of let's say an artist who is beyond emerging but still on that growth curve. They can use an advance to, fund a tour or expand into new territories and things like that. But then on a more sort of like a bigger level, I'm interested in how that works and what they do. And there's a couple of examples you mentioned to me before we spoke, which one of them was Two Lost, the distributor. Obviously, don't give away the secrets, but what was the sort of, what were they looking for? And how has that deal worked? And what has it allowed them to do?
It's super simple.
Right.
Not to say it's easy, but super simple. They are the fastest growing independent distributor in the world. You're going to hear, if you're people haven't heard about them, you're going to hear more about them. They are, they have artists on their platform who many people think are on the majors. They are the back end for a lot of platforms that people, once again, I let them announce it, not me. Yeah. But people, bigger names in the industry, they're running the back end of their platforms. They're kicking ass and taking names. They need money to sign artists, and so they through a variety of structures, they have a sort of fungible pool of money based on the catalog they'd already built up that they don't go to us and ask permission for. They just use the money to sign new artists. They also will present new signings to us every week. They still do it. And we will say, yeah, if you want to sign this artist in these terms, we will fund it. And, they're taking their fee. Sometimes they're, getting, a new release commitment based on a marketing commitment they have to the artist. That's not part of our deal. So they, there's some money in it for them. But, they're not the only one where independent labels and independent distributors looking to grow. We can be capital to sign new artists, and we're not going to take a share of your business. It's not a JV where we take equity. It's, to use finance speak, non-dilutive capital. And by the way, if those artists don't perform, we're not going to come and, it's not dead either, right? So it's a pretty, because we understand music, we're able to provide a kind of capital to these kinds of businesses that a lot of other people aren't.
So that's I can see how that works from your perspective and Tulos's perspective. What from the perspective of artists who are considering working with Tulos, what does that offer them?
Yeah, so I mean, we're very focused on the money in our business, but that doesn't mean that services aren't important. The genesis of this business, I think I told you, is that services are super important. We actually don't provide services because they're so important, because I know I can't be all things to all people. So, Tulos has some marketing services. They have an A&R team.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is sounding like an infomercial with Tulos.
Stay focused, please. Yes.
So, Tulos and others, I should say.
Yes.
They offer critical services, right? And independent labels offer critical services. I do not kid myself in thinking that if we can just solve the money problem, artists are on their way. Mm-hmm. They need partners. You need someone to help you get the music out. You need someone to help you think through, do I go on discovery mode or not, right? Do I, I need help shooting this video. Maybe, the label you work with has a connection with a producer, right? That can set you up, right? And so we are by no means a complete solution. We're sort of very deliberately an incomplete solution, but we can help all the different kinds of labels and all the different kinds of producers that are each uniquely suited to serve a subset of the market to do what they do. And we empower them with capital so that they can do that. Like, going back to the majors, just really quick, sorry, and the advantage that the majors still have is they have a gigantic checkbook. Mm-hmm. They have great people, but they don't necessarily have the best people. And they definitely do not have the people who are the right fit for every artist, including big artists. There are a lot of executives, many of whom who used to work at major labels, who now run independent labels or just starting their own label. Maybe they, were at Warner or Sony or Universal a year ago, right? So very talented folks out there, right? They can do almost everything a major can do, but they just need money. And we want to empower those people to empower artists and serve them well.
Okay. I mean, speaking of labels, another one you mentioned to me was, is it MAD Solutions or MAD Solutions?
Yes.
They are focused on the Nigerian music market, which is an explosively exciting market. Right. I mean, is that another example of something as simple as, okay, they've got a significant foothold in a really exciting market with music that people are really desperate to hear, and they need capital to expand or to cement their foothold? How does that work?
Yeah, a little bit of both. So without betraying too much, our money has been used for the first case to sign new artists. The label head there has used us to acquire new artists. He's also used our money to build out his own technology platform.
Okay.
And so we don't tell people how to use the music. Now, if there's a new music component in our funding, we will never tell someone we don't like that song, we like this song, but it needs to be used for new music, right? And there are ways that we can make sure that that's true. But other than that, the money can be used as the artist or the entrepreneur or independent label owner sees fit.
That's some good case studies there about how people have used it and the options.
Yeah.
I'm interested in looking ahead a bit now. And one of the things you've mentioned throughout our conversation is essentially this transition that has already happened, but it's continuing to happen from the old model to let's call it the new model. Yeah. I mean, it's no secret that artists or artist teams or rights holders, the signifier of this is, in a sense, is that they're all trying to shift at every level to a direct-to-consumer model of some sort, which is about control. It's about saying, hey, this is the artist. We have all the bits of technology within our grasp to connect that artist directly to fans and to more fully monetize that, right? And I guess you were part of that. It's this unbundling thing. Okay? Yep. As we look forward into the music industry in sort of 5 to 10 years' time, how is this going to factor into your future strategies for artists and rights holders? Mm-hmm. And I'm also really interested as a sort of to split that two ways in existing artists who have catalogs now and are making decisions in the future, but also new artists who are emerging now and may never sign a deal, traditional deal.
Our aspiration is to become the place you go if you're looking for funding your next project, right? We're not principally interested in acquiring rights and exploiting music as an asset class. There's 1,001 XPE guys out there doing that, right? That's not what we're going to do. More power to them, but I don't want to be the 1,001th guy doing that. So we're about funding your next project, and we want a place people go to do that. So for us, where we're at in our journey is, we need to raise our own capital so we could do some deals. Now while we're raising more and more capital, more and more of the deals we're doing are with people who are coming in and bidding up the deal on the artist's behalf or the label's behalf. So, we're now assembling multiple funding sources on our platform. The next step for us, and we have a lot more to do on that front, next step for us is to have multiple service providers. And we believe that we can use data to help artists and service providers match more elegantly with the right person. There are producers out there, and we've done this analysis. It's not a product we have yet, but who are not Rick Rubin famous, who in their genre overpunch their weight. Mm-hmm. And that actually can factor into the amount of money that we or a partner may be able to be willing to fund for the next project. If this particular artist is matched with this producer, or this producer is matched with these kinds of artists, the deal should be worth more, right? Yeah. And you should be able to invest more in it. So we want to, I don't want to say ever go beyond a place where money isn't important, because we want to sort of stick to our knitting. But there are elements to the deal where services impacts the economics of a deal that we can get better at, helping people make decisions through the lens of money. If I'm an artist and I know that I can get $100,000 advance for a next album, but if I work with one of these three producers, it's $120,000, and if I work with one of these 4 marketing services companies, it's all of a sudden $160,000, and not because they're bribing us to do it, but because actually our data shows that the chances that album will do better are actually higher. That's where we want to head.
Yeah. And what's your thinking about this this idea that moving forwards, you've got emerging artists who may never engage with the traditional system. They may go. I mean, it's happening already, right? You've sort of alluded to this with big name artists.
Yeah.
But in terms of it becoming a standard practice thing for emerging artists to say, you know what, I'm going to take this path and I'm going to stay in control and I'm going to use people like beatBread to free up the money, and I'm going to use that money to do these things, marketing and expansion and whatever. Of course, it shifts the responsibility onto them, and maybe or maybe not, they're comfortable with that. But do you see that? I'm talking big picture here. Do you see that part of the market expanding? Because they're coming to you, yeah.
100%. Like so first of all, 100%. It's going to continue to expand. The majors are shedding their frontline staff. Mm-hmm. So all those people are now starting their own independent labels, right? Mm-hmm. Artists have more choice than ever, even if they don't want to go with the independent label, right? A lot of them will end up with an independent label, still owning their music and things like that. But Sony, Rob Stringer, very talented guy, but he has this knack for saying the quiet part out loud. He said multiple times on investor calls that the core pillar of Sony's strategy going forward is buying mature catalog. Mm-hmm. In other words, they're not in the artist development business anymore, very overtly, right? Now the major, Warner and Universal are signing people later and later, right? So that's true. The other thing is, these reports that come out every year that talk about, 72% of music consumption is, catalog, right? Well, catalog is defined as something that is, 3 years older, right?
Yes, it's a term that needs discussing, doesn't it? Yeah.
Right. But then they also say, well, the majors have 60 or 70% of the market. Well, if you actually stop and think about that a second, if most music, and let's say that 50% of it, and I actually used to know this number by heart, I don't anymore, is more than 10 years old. And then the majors have 60% market share. Majors dominate all the stuff that's more than 10 years old. Mm-hmm. Do the math. More than half of new music consumed, I'm not talking songs, I'm talking about listens and dollars. And for your audience, pounds or euros, sorry to be the ugly American here. Half of the actual economic value of music released this year is already independent. If you just look at new music, and that has just been accelerating. I think you're going to find there's going to be a time when, maybe the majors step in once you hit the top 100. But then the problem for the majors then is once an artist has reached them, they're like, wait, why do I need you?
Yeah, right? Offering a deal is valuable or enticing enough, right?
What's the point, right? And frankly, quietly, Bad Bunny and Kendrick, nominally on majors, even Taylor. I have not seen those deals. I, however, would be willing to bet a very large amount of money if you looked at those deals. They're distribution deals with razor thin rates, and they're basically independent, even though they are apparently on the majors already, right?
Interesting.
So, yeah.
And so that is it. I mean, that's another signifier of a huge shift, right?
Yeah.
And that may be something that we will see in a bunch of different ways going forward. The majors becoming essentially. Often sports analogies work well, but I can't think of one now. But they're sort of like a very, very big sports team who dominates by soaking up stars at the top of the game, and they pay huge money and they have huge success.
Yeah, I often analogize the music industry to the pharma industry. So Glaxo or Merck don't develop drugs. They buy drugs from innovative biotechs. Mm-hmm. Once they've already passed all through the hurdles of the trials and everything. And then they just market them, right? And so I think that's more and more what the music industry is going to become. Although I think the model isn't quite as good because Merck and Glaxo have clear advantages in marketing a mature drug. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that the majors really do, other than a hand, there's a very small number of people who can, really exploit Pink Floyd and Queen and, Bruce Springsteen. Although, Primary Wave's damn good at it and they're not a major, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously, I'm sure you've raised the eyebrows of some people at the majors, and I'm sure by comparing them to Big Pharma, they're equally excited by that comparison. Just one more question then about you mentioned earlier you've raised, I think you said 130 million in terms of you raising funding for the business.
Soon. That's going to go up, but okay.
Sure, yeah. You've raised this amount so far. What do they see in it in terms of, this is a reasonably new business model, and okay, investors are looking for new things to invest in, but how comfortable do they feel in terms of investing in this thing, which your music, which I think historically has seemed a bit nebulous.
Yeah, no, listen, if I can just be frank, on the venture side, it's been hard for raising money for our company. We actually haven't raised a lot of money for our company. We've raised a lot of money to give to artists and labels, and those are different buckets of money.
Yeah.
We've been able to raise not going to say anything specific. It's now in the hundreds of millions. Announcement coming soon. For a couple of reasons. The first is sort of just the category. Wall Street and has figured out that mature music rights are a pretty stable asset, uncorrelated with economic cycles, and there's a lot of data in music, which is sort of counterintuitive. But then when you look at it, there's more data in music than any sector I've ever been exposed to. And then what we provide is a sort of disciplined approach to a section of the market and a section of an artist's life cycle that a lot of other people aren't focused on. So we have a lot of data-driven investors interested in the songs themselves, not necessarily in buying. Even that's not perpetuity. There's a lot of just inherent interest there. The second reason, I have to give a shout out to my co-founder. My co-founder, John Holler, is a world-class data scientist. He has done algorithmic energy trading. He has built models. He was doing AI more than 10 years ago, when it wasn't cool, right? And when we were first raising for this company, AI wasn't cool 5 years ago. Everyone wanted us to be an NFT company.
You dodged that bullet then.
He has, he built, optical recognition systems that could take a picture of a car and then make an estimate of the repair, right? Using data science. So we have a very, very accurate machine. I can say with confidence that no one is better at data-driven prediction in music than we are. And that's really a testament to him, not to me. And so that is sort of how we've been able to attract large amounts of capital in music. And the folks who like the way that we underwrite see that there is a lot of sort of legacy process that's pretty inefficient in the music industry, and there's an opportunity to fund new music and working artists in a better way than it currently is.
I will put a link to the deal comparison tool next to the podcast. People can check it out for themselves. You've mentioned a few different ways that people have been using it there. So, I'm sure that's food for thought for a lot of people who are considering their next deal at the moment, which is a lot of people.
I would say, if you have an offer, please let us just show you how it works out. I promise you, we'll show you the math. You can play with it side by side, look at different scenarios. Our tool does not always show that the beatBread deal is the best deal. And it's just a great tool to sort of make a good decision.
Okay, great. Well, I'm sure people will are intrigued now and are going to go and test that theory. Listen, Peter, one final question, which is, we've talked about music technology and finance and things like that. Let's talk about music for 1 second as the final question. And it's essentially trying to get a bit of a fingerprint on you, and that is if you could only pick one piece of music to listen to for the rest of your life. I'm willing to push to an album if needs be, but what would you choose?
One album.
This is generally the hardest question. So
Only one album. Can I say two?
go on then. Okay.
I'm going to say Mothership Connection by Parliament.
Okay.
And then I am a huge Bill Withers fan, so Bill Withers' Greatest Hits.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good couple of choices there, and you're sort of getting value for money out of Parliament, aren't you? Because there's a lot of music in that album.
Yes.
There's a lot to listen to. What do you like particularly about Parliament?
So I grew up, for your listeners in the U.S., I grew up in northern New England, stone's throw from Canada. So I listened to all the classic 80s and 90s white rock bands, and that was just all there was, right? And in my particular little cultural section of the world, I saw George Clinton play my junior year in college, and it actually blew me away. It changed my musical taste. I was slow to sort of come to hip hop and rap, and I sort of came to it backwards because I now listen to a lot of hip hop, but I discovered Parliament first. Just literally Tuesday or Thursday night or something. Didn't know what to do. He happened to be playing, and it was absolutely awesome. So that it just total accent. I've probably seen him 50 times since then.
Really? Wow. Okay.
The gift that my team gave me was one of those, you can get a video from a star. That was my birthday gift from the team. Was George Clinton sent me a birthday.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty good. Yeah, of course, that's a great way into hip hop. They've been sampled so many times, and you can recognize those parts. And I actually saw Parliament over 10 years ago at a music festival in the UK, and it was a 3-hour set. It was amazing, and the backing singers on roller skates, the full shebang.
Yeah. I saw the full, the play with the guy climbing the stage and the whole Mothership Connection thing. I saw that. I've only seen that part of that thing once, but
okay. Good. It's spoken like a true fan. Okay, Peter, thanks very much, and I appreciate your time. And thanks for joining us on the podcast.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate you having us.
Okay, that's it. Thanks again to Peter for joining us. And if you found that useful, please do share the podcast on with someone who you think will also get something out of it. If you want to get in touch with me, I would love, of course, to hear from you. You can email me, as always, at joe@musically.com. Links to beatBread are in the description around the podcast, so you can check it out for yourself. And thank you for listening. I've been Joe Sparrow. You have been you. And until next time, farewell.